Welcome to Carol and Gary's See America Tour. Hello everyone! After a long 2-day drive and a time zone change, Carol, Jasper, and I are now in Idaho. Boise, Idaho to be exact. We will be in Boise for 5 days. But before we start talking about Idaho, let me get us out of Washington. We drove south from Bellingham until we reached Seattle, then turned east on Interstate 90. Interstate 90 crosses the Cascade Mountains, so in a span of approximately 50 miles we went from sea level in Seattle to over 3,000 feet. I believe this snow-capped peak on the left is Granite Mountain. Granite Mountain is 5,633 feet. It looks like we have reached the summit and will be starting down the east side of the Cascades, so I will turn this back over to Google Maps. As suggested by Google in February, we stopped overnight in Kennewick, Washington to break up the long move to Boise. The next morning we followed Interstate 84 southeast from Kennewick, Washington to Boise, Idaho. Idaho became the 43rd state on July 3, 1890, and is the 24th state that Carol and I have visited together. And since I mentioned time change earlier, did you know that only 13 U.S. states are split into 2 time zones, and Idaho is one of them? Our first stop in Boise was the Old Idaho Penitentiary. Construction of the penitentiary began on July 4, 1870. Boise was selected for the location of the penitentiary because of the availability of the nearby sandstone. Inmates from the nearby Boise County Jail assisted with quarrying the sandstone penitentiary. The Old Idaho Penitentiary, which was originally just one building and identified in red in the drawing as number 8, opened its doors in March 1872 when 11 of the most desperate criminals were transferred from the Boise County Jail. This original building was converted into a chapel in the 1930s and would be burned by inmates during a riot in 1973. Between 1889 and 1890, the new cell house, identified as number 9 in the drawing, was erected. It consisted of 3 tiers of 42 steel cells. The third tier on the west side served as death row. The area identified as number 7 is now a rose garden. The area was once used to execute prisoners by hanging. The administration building, identified as 18 on the drawing, was built between 1893 and 1894. It housed the warden's office, the armory where they stored weapons, the visitation room, the control room, and the turnkey area. The false front building, identified as 17 in the drawing, was built between 1894 and 1895. It held a commissary, trustee dorm, barber shop, and blacksmith shop. The blacksmith shop would be remodeled into the prison hospital in 1912 and remain the hospital until the 1960s. The dining hall, which is number 6 on the map, was built in 1898. It was designed by George Hamilton, who was an inmate at the time. He was given an early release for his work in designing the dining hall. The dining hall would be burned down during the 1973 riot. Cell house number 2, identified as number 13 in the drawing, was built in 1899. It contains 2-man cells. A honey bucket was placed in each cell to serve as a toilet. Parts of this building were burned by inmates during the 1973 riot. Cell house number 3, identified as number 12 in the drawing, was built in 1899. It was eventually condemned for habitation, but in 1921 was converted into a shoe factory. In 1928, this building was remodeled for inmate occupancy and became the first cell house with indoor plumbing. The women's ward, identified as number 19 in this drawing, was built out of necessity between 1905 and 1906. Prior to its completion, women did not have separate quarters. Male inmates built a wall around the old warden's house to serve as a separate facility for women. This building has 7 two-person cells, a central day room, kitchen, and bathroom facilities. Built by inmates in 1923, the multi-purpose building, identified here as number 10 and 11 on the drawing, served as a shirt factory, a shoe shop, the bakery, the license plate shop, laundry, hobby room, and loafing room. It also housed the communal showers. This was the equipment used to do laundry. Solitary confinement consisted of 2 sections, but is listed as number 1 in the drawing. The first section, built in the early 1920s, was the cooler. Although built for solitary confinement, each cell contained 4 to 6 men. The second section, known as Siberia, was built in 1926 and housed 12 3x8 cells with 1 inmate per cell. Cell house number 4, identified as number 14 in the drawing, was built in 1952. It was the largest and most modern cell house at the penitentiary. Cell house number 5, identified as number 16 in the drawing, was built in 1954. It was maximum security, where the most unruly and violent offenders stayed. The building also served as a permanent place of solitary confinement. It included a gallows and death row. Although not a building, there was an outdoor recreation area identified as number 15 on the drawing, where inmates boxed and played baseball, basketball, handball, tennis, horseshoes, and football. In most buildings housing prisoners, this area identified in red is a narrow hallway between two rows of cells. A small hole in the back wall of each cell provides an area where the guards could watch an inmate without them knowing they were being watched. The area also provided easy access to plumbing if needed. The Old Idaho Penitentiary housed more than 13,000 inmates with a maximum population of a little over 600 during their 101 years of operation. There were over 500 escape attempts during this time, of which at least 90 were successful. While officials eventually apprehended most escape inmates, some remain at large. On Friday, Carol and I toured the Idaho State Capitol in Boise. Boise has not always been the capital of Idaho. When Abraham Lincoln signed the law that created the Idaho Territory in March 1863, he left the task of choosing a temporary capital to the newly appointed territorial governor. Due to its importance of mining operations in northern Idaho, the territorial governor selected Lewiston. By 1864, with the discovery of gold moved south, so did the population with it. After several heated discussions took place, it was decided to move the territorial capital south, to Boise. In 1885, a new territorial capitol building was erected in Boise. But by 1905, 15 years after becoming a state, the government had outgrown the building, so a new state capitol building was started. Phase 1, which included the construction of the central section and dome, was completed in 1912. Phase 2 added the east and west wings. This phase was completed between 1919 and 1921. This is Brad J. Little, a Republican, the current governor of Idaho. He was elected in January 2019 after serving as a lieutenant governor for 10 years. The governor has a private office on the second floor of the Capitol building and an office across the hall where he makes speeches, meets with the public, and signs bills into law. The public office is open to visitors when a government event is not scheduled, so I was able to go in and take pictures. Idaho has 35 state senators. This is where they meet to debate and vote on new laws. This gallery above the state senators' chambers allows visitors to view the proceedings when the legislature is in session. There are 69 members in the State House of Representatives. This is where they meet to debate and vote on new laws. This gallery above the State House of Representatives chambers allows visitors to view the proceedings when the legislature is in session. The Capitol building has 4 stories. Beautiful marble spindles adorn the stairs and atrium. Here is a view looking up toward the roof from the ground floor. And here is a view of the ground floor from the 3rd floor. After a short but extremely interesting week in Boise, we will be leaving tomorrow for 5 days in Twin Falls, Idaho. If you like this video but have not yet subscribed, please do so to be notified of future videos, and as always, feel free to share with your friends. Thanks for watching.